So we'll start with Lamrim Guru Yoga, then we'll correct the motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. On the heart of the sever of 100 deities of Kushida, on the peak of cloud resembling climb of extremely white fresh curve, King of Dhamma, Nisan Lawson Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me, on lying throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme fill of merit from a mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech, with its excellent explanation, is an ear ornament of for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory and renown. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Cleansing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, light-scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I've collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practicing in this degenerate age and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Sever, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect pure holy gurus from the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I've collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Lawson Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sashi Poki Jushia Meto Tamri Rabling Shim Ni Degem Padi Sangye Shindu Mikte Owa Girdrokunamda Shin La Chu Pasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one, Lawson Drakpa, where the morality of an eminently pure way of life was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. In page 13, we will recite the 5-line Mixima verse 3 times. Mimetse wete chen rezi, jime kembe wambo jumping yan, dupu malu jumze sanweda, kanchen kembe tsugen tsongapa, losandra pe shabla soade. Mimetse wete chen rezi, jime kembe wambo jumping yan, dupu malu jumze sanweda, kanchen kembe tsugen tsongapa, losandra pe shabla soade. Mimetse wete chen rezi, jime kembe wambo jumping Dupo malu jonze sanweda, kanche kimbe tsugen tsongapa, lo sandra pe shabla soade. Chonan tsogi chonam la, chanchu badu dani kyapsu chi, dagi chinyegi betsonangi, drola penche sange do pasho. Chonan tsogi chonam la, chanchu badu dani kyapsu chi, dagi chinyegi betsonangi, drola penche sange do pasho. Chodan Sogi Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kamsuchi Dage Chunyi Gi Betsona Gi Drola Penchi Sange Dropa Sho. As Geshe entered the Gompa, I saw like a dashing young man sitting on the side, and kind of we didn't see the person clearly. And then the person did kind of really nice prostration, and Geshe was wondering who that person was, and then he looked over and said, "Oh, it's Matt. Hi, Matt." Mm. Mm. Doesn't the Tandayamana Chula? Hmm. Now, also we have visiting students with us. So you from which school? All right. So where is it? Kuroi. Okay. So it's like an hour drive, more or less, 40 minutes. All right. So um, welcome everyone. Gesla spoke with a spiritual program coordinator who told him that you're coming today. And you might have questions. So Geshe is really happy to answer whatever questions you have, um, either now or at the end of the session or somewhere in between. If you have any questions or doubts, you can just put your hand up and we can have some discussion. So here we're looking at a text that explains the steps of the path of enlightenment. Now, for those of us who've joined us today, um, if you haven't done some study before, you might find it a little bit boring. So um, rather than kind of waiting till the end for you to become utterly bored, if you have questions now, if you have any questions about the Buddhist tradition, Geshe is happy to answer some of those questions. So if you're wondering, what do Buddhists believe? What are the views? What are the practices? How do they consider the world? What kind of practices they engage with? What is the way of developing the way they wish to be of benefit to others? Geshe can answer it to his best ability, and maybe it will be, maybe it will provide some help. Geshe spent most of his life studying the Buddhist tradition, studying scriptures at the foot of great masters, great teachers. So He's had a little bit about Buddhism, had developed some knowledge. So if you have any questions, Geshe is really happy to answer. So Geshe also spent a lot of time when he was younger studying. So similar to what you guys do, working hard on your studies. Although, of course, the topic was different. Still, there was quite a lot of hard work that was involved with seeking Buddhist education. So Geshe, having been born in Tibet, he made his way to India and he joined a monastery in South India. This is where he did most of his studies. So South India is a very kind of the area was really hot. The weather was hot. The food, the dwelling, the clothing, this is say the robes, all of those conditions were pretty harsh, pretty poor. But still, Geshe was very happy to be there and also to engage in his studies in a very with lots of enthusiasm. So the way that a common day in a monastery goes is that you wake up really early, pre-dawn. Then you spend the earlier phase of the day doing some memorizing. So every day you have to memorize a certain quota of text. Then um, later on during the morning, you go to see your teachers and they give you explanations of the section that you have memorized. Then you take it on in debate sessions with your colleagues, with your classmates. You engage with this material through questions and answers. Then there is another long debate session that starts in the evening. It goes for a few hours. Then you go home and might get to midnight or 1 o'clock, and you still need to then make sure that you do not forget the things that you have committed to memory in the morning. So you do some recitation and then you go to sleep. So Geshe did it for quite a few years, day in and day out. So you can say that this is how he spent the major part of his life. So having said that, if you have any questions or doubts, Geshe is probably be able to answer some of them. There's some similarities in your fashion of studies, in your matter of studies, and what Geshe has done before. So Geshe reckons that being in high school, you study the sciences, different topics, physics, maybe some topics related to medicine. In physics, the study of particles, atoms, molecules, and so forth. In the Buddhist tradition, there's not only an explanation of the external world and some references to particles and the makeup of particles, but mainly the main emphasis really is on the inside, internally, the mind, our mind, our mentality. And the Buddhist tradition offers such an extensive, a very deep and very subtle presentation of the mind and the way that the mind works. So it could be a source for quite an interesting conversation if we would get the time to, sit around the table and discuss views from the scientific field and also from the mental field, mental area. Krishna reckons that all of us can develop some new insights and expand our mind in new knowledge and new information. So that could be an interesting thing to do. But of course, in this setup, it's hard really to do it. Maybe in the future, we'll get the opportunity to do that. And of course, having said that, there's some discussion in the Buddhist tradition with respect to particles, the makeup of materiality, and so forth. The discussion that you find in the Buddhist tradition is not as precise and deep as you find in scientific field. Like, for example, calculating the mass of a certain object, energy, um, the different calculations related to energy, energy in particles and so forth. You don't find that, of course, to that degree in the Buddhist presentation. There are some references, but certainly not to extent that you find them in science. There's, for example, in relation to some field of um, medication or medicine, there is an explanation in some ancient Buddhist texts. One of them was composed by a great Indian scholar called Nagarjuna that explains the combination of different medicinal plants, the application of them to different medical conditions, sicknesses, and so forth, the potential of certain plants and so forth. Such explanations also, such mode of explanation exists also in Buddhist literature. But then the main teachings of the Buddhist tradition focuses on the development of certain mental states. So loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, how to generate them, how to increase them in our mind. And the teachings that are found in the Buddhist tradition are so profound. And the application of those teachings is not exclusive to Buddhists only. It's not only if you're Buddhist, you can develop love and compassion and wisdom using the techniques that are taught in the Buddhist tradition. So the presentation is so profound and so subtle. And if you study the way to develop your mind in this way, it does not mean to say that you have to become Buddhist. It doesn't mean to say that you have to follow this tradition. You can still use those techniques for developing loving kindness and wisdom and compassion to be of benefit to others, not only to human beings, but also by and large to everything that lives. So Geshe is wondering if you have any questions. There are some. Oh yeah, because Geshe said that no, it seems that usually during those occasions, there's always the shyness of the first one to, someone needs to be the brave one, the first one to put the hand up. So might be that you're a little bit apprehensive. When, all right. Hmm. Hmm. You mean kind of schools in Buddhism like Mahayana, Hinayana? Hmm. Um, Dilla season Kuranto Gegengi, Dilla Zindo Chuchi Tanchuni Nigadwa. Pesce conto gran kare sumbananchi destinanchi yodes. Ine pesce kurandi kalasena. Tanda gonzo lobja la chulu minja tola lobjin chigirwa. Nambe chuyan tola ngurtu chiyodes. Dila nambe chula di techen tan temen tan pesce sangam dojete badende chik duas ditola deshe bit suntuainas. Hmm. So you studied that's in the context of comparative religion topic at school. So what other religions do you study at school? Mm. Mm. 네, 건조디 출로 민다 돌아 lokala de ngotu chira de Jewish chulo Hindu chulo de Yeshu chulo de la sopa de minda tola ngotu chira des. Mm. Hmm. So there's one thing that also I'm just going to complete from the previous bit. So Geshe said that, in relation to being kind of sometimes a bit shy or apprehensive in asking questions, the way that people study in the monastery from young age is quite involved with questions and answers and debates and challenging someone's position and trying to find faults in someone's position. So you're training that for so many years, to the point where even when you have sometimes those big um, debate sessions where you debate different views, you don't shy away from standing up and stating a certain view or trying to find faults in someone else's view. Um, in a sense of when you're young, there is also a sense of competitiveness that you might have as a young monk. So, that sense of shyness or being a little bit apprehensive about it is not very common. Anyway, Geshe can answer that question with respect to the different um, traditions within Buddhism. He can, of course, give some answers about it. But he thinks that the benefit in just knowing the kind of those different terminology or the differences, the benefit from that is not that great, in a sense that we might know the terms, we might have some positions, but then in terms of understanding what the views and what the practices are that Buddhist practitioners have, it might still be not that helpful. Anyway, Geshe can, of course, answer that question.
수수 치부 마인 바, 즉 수수 남자 마인 바, 롬바 코란, 야급 코란 비게기 즉 아니 야게단 죽든 제야다 도당 돌아 상무다니 로브존 칭이 즉 여러스. 더 디니 아니 로트 코란 드라마스 미치버리 이나야 로트 드라마스 디나신게 태고 멤버스 라온디 수수 치부 비게 아니 데버토비아 전쟁이티 아니 산지점 된디 제수주 쪼디 아니 랑 데버톨이야 토벨이야 전등인데 랑기 동아세 탑시 제등인들이야 대부 멤버스고레스 더 심전 탐지기 되는데 콜렌친 비기 단지 수대야 아니 른단징기 잠제다 아니 시럽이야 럽진 심전 탐지래야 팬디드리야 또 상단등이들이야 대부 첨부세고레스.
And so we use in the Buddhist tradition those terms Mahayana and Hinayana. Now the Mahayana is when if we translate it into English, it means the great vehicle. The Hinayana is the smaller vehicle. Sometimes it is called the lesser or the smaller vehicle. But the word small and big refer to one's determination or one's courage. So you have a vehicle for those who have strong determination, strong courage, and those that have lesser courage or lesser determination. And we are different to each other in the sense that we have different mentalities, different dispositions. So some of us might be more determined, more kind of strong-minded. Others might be not as strong-minded. So those two Buddhist traditions, first of all, are differentiated according to the strength of mind or determination. In a sense that in the Hinayana vehicle, Buddhist practitioners are aiming at fulfilling or perfecting their own welfare. They want to, for their own sake alone, attain freedom from suffering. In that sense, they work for their own welfare. Whereas in the Mahayana tradition, the great vehicle tradition, Buddhist practitioners work not only for their own welfare, for their own happiness and well-being, but they consider the welfare of all living beings. So the practice of concern for others, of love and compassion, is particularly emphasized in this tradition, and motivated by a sense of concern for others. The main focus is fulfilling the benefit of others, leading others to a state of happiness and well-being. So the determination or the mental strength that is required for this path is greater. So this path or vehicle is called the Mahayana.
There's Google and you long keba cheshin, you long the table member is there, you long the take jump. Tindigi, you long keba ched, Yajadamba, Norwidus, teaching on the big ENG sort of layagi, Penyangandos, and Sanjum in the Chilaya, ENG samlodi, and Dukshu Sigurta, Torgoya Cheshudi, ENG samlod, Cholong samlodi. 샤자 디 노르군두스라 이나야 비기 다지 비기 랑 탈비 람라야 로비기 탑되딩기 랍자 디 소니 추규 딘진이다 제딩의 리얼이 야 태보 챔비기 비기 랍자라야 랍딩이 추긴 딘진딩이 디 달geb체종 요론 소소라야 달geb 챔부디 체종이 개바 열마도 요론 차니 택잼바데 팀멤버 세디 zon인 마레스.
Now, sometimes the division into Mahayana and Hinayana is done according to the geographic setup. So sometimes we speak about Mahayana countries and Hinayana countries. Geshe reckons that if we limit our discussion of Mahayana and Hinayana just to geographical setup of Southeast Asia, this is rather a divisive approach. So from a Buddhist perspective, developing a divisive approach, a sense of partiality is regarded as not only a mistake, but the worst mistake. So when we look at Mahayana and Hinayana and try to assess localities, areas, places, countries from geographic perspective, certainly there are places in which there is an emphasis on working for one's own liberation alone, or working for the sake of liberation of all other living beings. But rather than dividing the Mahayana and Hinayana from the point of view of just where they exist, the main emphasis is one's strength of mind or one's determination, either working for one's own sake or working for the sake of others.
Tiri mado sangi pigi tachi labja delaya denusum sejoras denusum ani duvi dennu ngombi dennu dordi dennus ta disum gu joja karasagdi sutum tenginzi sherabsum tris ta di laya malam ngenji ani tegba chechu suchi yo maras samalog labshigi pigi denusum chikba chigyares sutum labala lab goya tenginzi labala lab goya sherabgi labala lab goya chikba chigyares ro.
And so when you look at the teachings of the Buddha can be divided into what we call the three baskets or the three pitakas. There are three collections of teachings and they have names that are ascribed to them. So the first collection of teaching is called the teachings on Vinaya. Then the second collection is called the teachings on sutras. And the third teaching is called the teachings on knowledge or Abhidhamma in Indian language. And each one of those collection of teachings has a particular subject matter. So the teachings on Vinaya is teaching the training in ethical discipline. The teachings on Sutra teaches how to develop concentration. And the teaching on wisdom or Abhidhamma is teaching the way to develop wisdom. So all Buddhist traditions, Mahayana and Hinayana, all of them train in those three trainings. There's no one that is excluding. None of those traditions is excluding any of those training. All of them train in ethics, in concentration, and in wisdom.
Terda dindigi labasum nyamne yobi tone. Tas sambi kebardi pi ta chamzi ro. Chong da travi 심장 탐지를 미비 장바세 지금도 딘지 잠지 토니 덴누스물에 라바지 람긴지 바이나 아니 디 태고 쳔보스라고 그랬어 간지 아니 디 잠지 만당 당그 메바이나 디 태고 멤비 텔이야 수바레스 디지 케바 디르마도 쳔바 칸이요 말했어 뭐 찍버리 주찍버리 안 따버지버 저버지버다.
And so the training in ethics, in concentration, and wisdom can be affected by different attitudes, different mentalities. Like, for example, when your attitude and mentality is so imbued with love and concern for others, without any sense of partiality, in training in wisdom, concentration, and ethics for the sake of all sentient beings without exception, then you're using those three trainings and you're considered to be a Mahayana practitioner. Whereas if your love and compassion to others is not developed to that extent, it doesn't reach that measure, then you're training in those trainings, but you're regarded as a Hinayana practitioner.
Tadini sanga doji tebi gichu sadi pigita sangshen bebi tsuji nyamnenge nejilaya shigiyores. Tadi kani yongores lavdige kondu shibigi pigita ji ani labasum nyamne titolaya ani ji rentanjengi chamzi nyamnenti ting sabuchi tsutsevi jelaya teni tadi ndigi chambat chamzedang ani sherab sabdun joyagi ani chik sami nyamlentinji yunguyores tadi sangare so nyamlenti tadi chielaya nyamlenti chiele che choyagi pi tadi wancha da masona di susi geging zane da lengo das tadi len di lemba chebalaya susi wancha lembayina susulaya wancha di zintuya niba yobadi 아니 비기 라버섬다 아니 잠지 냠린티 고고레스 디 셈나로 여바이나 원자 렘바이나 진투고레스 디 메바이나 원자 렘바이나 원자 진투고 말에 인자 원자 띵잉기 제초 말에 랭잉기 렌초 말레스 디 참니티니 냠린 믹스와 지금자 상가도지 TV 추스 다다 조데레스라.
So in general, we have the Hinayana, then we have the Mahayana, and then there is another tradition which is called the Vajrayana. Now, the Vajrayana is called in English the Vajra vehicle. It is also called the secret vehicle, in that the practice of this tradition is said to be, or it needs to be practiced in secret. Your practice needs to be hidden to others. So first off, this practice requires receiving of permission to practice it. So you need to go to your teacher, you need to have an assessment of where you're at, and then you need to obtain permission to put it into practice, and you also need to uphold this permission. In order to do that, you need to have a profound sense of love and concern for others. So if you don't have the ability to practice it in the way, with all those requirements to have love and concern for others, if you don't have the ability to take on the permission and also to uphold it, well, it's not really, a teacher is not really supposed to give you the permission to put it into practice, and also you cannot really put it into practice. So again, it is a system of instructions and practices that require the practitioner to have a mature sense of love and concern for others. It is considered to be something that should be practiced in secret. Your practice should be hidden to others, and only when you get permission to put it into practice, then you can do so.
Teringe namju pero dindi jargi yosra pena nganzu lomba jigi pombu chen dengi jimbaina ta pombu ge wangja lengo grasra pombu wangja lambala ya lobjon yabu ju temena pombu 지투 말하다 본부 완전 째바 있나야 지투 말아서라 쟁인디 째바 있나야 쟁인디 지투 말아 진짜 쟁인디 째외바 많이 봐 랭이 랭외바 많이 봤어 야자자다 뭐 차야도 딘디도지 고 딘디지 토니 아니 비 누구랬어
What Geshe looks at that is similar to some degree to a political system. So suppose that someone is becoming a leader, prime minister, let's say, in a particular place, which means that first off, they need to be nominated as the leader, the prime minister. They need to be given the permission to do that. But in order to be nominated to be the prime minister, in order to become the prime minister, you need to have a certain level of education. You need to have the training that will allow you to fulfill that role in the right way, let's say. So without having those trainings, someone might nominate you to that position, or you might actually get to fulfill that position, but you not have all the requirements. You're not going to be able to uphold that responsibility. So you need to get the permission to do it, but also from your side, you need to have all the prerequisites that will make it possible for you to fulfill this position.
그래 당간서 ben 당간서 개개인한다 ben 럽적이 럽지인 바인한다 피기 원차 렘바 치발이야 수수 피기래야 럽적이 나올래야 아니 니버덴비 내가 체투야다 니버드 소소를 매바이나 더 딜람바이나다 아니 럽적들 경구시오라 그러서라 ben 개개인다 럽질라 소바 럽둘래야 샤자명이 치래야 개개인다 럽질라 거바이나 디 럽두 다바야 야가 말았으라 럽두를 샤자요 말았으라 되니 배 년가라다 디 진짜 럽두당 럽두라야 샤자당 라비아기 연대 영인 미지 개개인다 럽질을 내봐야나 럽두들 ranking 야부 차그러스라 디 소리지레다 간지
Or similarly, you might become a teacher or a principal in the school system. But without having the ability to fulfill your role, there's not going to be any benefit in you taking up the job. Sorry, not only there would be no benefit, it could be actually that it will be detrimental to the school system if you don't have the prerequisites or the qualities that will make it possible for you to become a teacher or a principal. So it can be actually quite dangerous. You need to have, first off, a sense of care for others. You need to have a sense of care for the students. You also, of course, need to have the training or the knowledge that is required for being a teacher. If you have no care whatsoever, if you don't care about your students, it's actually quite dangerous to become a teacher. If you have no knowledge or ability, no training in being a teacher, also there's no much point in you being nominated for that position. So if you do have those two components, having a sense of care for others, for the students, but also you've got the requisite trainings, then you can become a good teacher.
그래서 더비어스라 앞에는 상가 도시 TV기 아니 최 냠슬랭이지려야 아니 낭행기 라밍원에 냠슬랭행기 허밍원에 니초 야부지 정고다 빼나다 단들랍다 나싱기 롭지다 게게 비게 아니 롭조용에 삼반남다 아니 롭주원에 게겐다 롭질려야 90 매바이나 신통 매바이나 개개인 지붕은 펜타오문다 니속 여바이나 그라 럽주원에 개개인당 레젤이야 아니 지 90당 신통 여바 개개인당 비 럽주원에 럽주려야 제와당 아니 연대 여바 좀바이나 럽다 베 메나시 양 바르라서 교보슈치 야고 차그라 디 아니 상가 도지 디비 추 페레스로
So a teacher in the Vajrayana is similar to that, in that they need to have a sense of care for others. They also need to be well trained, but also from the point of view of the student, just like in school, you need to have a sense of respect for the teacher, in a sense that if you don't care at all about the teacher, if you don't have the sense of respect to them, your mind will not be open to listen to what they say, and therefore you're not going to get what you can get a certain level of education if your mind is not going to be open to what your teachers say. So similarly, also within the system of the Vajrayana, the Vajra vehicle, then the teacher needs to have a sense of care for the student, for the disciple. They need to also have the knowledge, the ability to teach it, but also from the point of view of the student, they also need to have certain qualities. So, like for example, having a sense of esteem in the teachers and also the teachings. So with a combination of these two from the teacher side and from the student side, having those qualities, then you can say that the blazing fire of this system can bring the whole path to culmination.
인도저다 아니 얘기티 캐런슬에 렌 춘주치라 이브리어예스라.
Anyway, Geshe is hoping that Budade was able to answer this first question. To give a little bit of explanation.
당한서 딜라야 자파산 쇼기 차지 아니 저다지 도고레스 디게 피 켄잠도디 소 참지 코트 라 참지 코트 시고레스.
Now, here during the Friday morning sessions, we've been looking at a text that is called the Milling Presentation of the States of the Path to Enlightenment. And the particular point in the text that we've been looking at as of late is relevant to the way to develop love and care for others.
레타 넘버 산지위게 종나마야 키치디 잠제생이들에셔서 더 잠제디 먼저 초린쟁기 잠제디기 아니 동안쟁기 여봐 라 비다 착당쟁기 여봐 컨트롤 소바다 딘디 디 야부지고 말다 초리메바 탐제로야지 장바생인 세와 용투야지 더 디슈송고도스라.
And so these two aspects of love and compassion, or love and care for others, are considered to be of the most important points to develop in our spiritual practices, Buddhists. Having a partial sense of love and care for others gives us problem. It gives us suffering, or we encounter complicated situation in which anger might arise because anger or hatred might arise because of a sense of love and care for others. It is partial. And therefore here, from the point of view of this presentation, it is crucial to develop love and care for others that are extended equally to all. Love and care that are impartial.
That delaya tamjelaya chamzigore sayatelaya and mimambu shug samlaya rangi dalamigigi chamzi kandis jungor say. The topa the samala yungor rangi dalamigigi and chamzi kandis yungores.
And if love and compassion need to be extended to all equally, then some people might wonder, how is that possible, for example, to have the sense of love and care for your enemy? It is likely that quite a few people wonder, how is it possible to develop the same attitude also equally with respect to your enemy?
This is the big land over there. Dressing touching the dying devajita, touching the yin devaji. Yomares. Namasanji Dilawada, Chanalia, touch the dying devaji. Terin Chanala Magas like Midi, Sani Yachajatam and Giordro Sigoros. Terigondan Giordro Sigoros. Gurni, Chanal Terin Magas like Medi Sani Tropo Yabu Shoji Chayagi. And Giordroenza, touching the dying devaji Mevanza. And it indeed any the Midalia and the Tadandi touching the data devadi, Susungun Norsha Sambik Sono Giovanna and Dalia Chamziki movie Gunsin Chia Samaris.
And when that question arises with respect to the possibility of generating that sense of love and concern, even for an enemy, we question the way that we perceive enemies. When we think of an enemy, when we think of enemies, the appearance that arises in our mind is as if an enemy of us is unequivocally an enemy. And someone that is close to our heart is unequivocally some of our close friends. We see no possibility of them changing position. But then when we think of how in our life we go through certain transformations in which today an enemy of yours might become someone that is close to your heart tomorrow. So it's not that an enemy is unequivocally an enemy. Although our mind perceives them in that way, still we can see that there are situations where those relationships transform. And we use that as a reason for saying that actually it is not impossible or it is not suitable to develop love and care for an enemy.
데레 딘자 피기다 지 자인 삼성기 삼로드 메바이나 안 디츠기 수수 셈바 기블 로그라스더라 아니 지 자인 삼성 마가사기 로지 율지 차바이나 아니 디난신기 수수려야 마키로로 셈려야 마키로로 레기어라스라 다 두소 독터 구조디 균다 감들 요라다 균 요래 연대 요레스 딘자 연딩 촌데 테스트 따투바이나 샘단 예르로야 아니 이동 통야 그 딘지 여반자 드링안도 셰야디 디레시스 연딩 촌 따고 그랬어 누슬라 때바이나라 진짜지 바이나라 개개인난다 럽지인난다 텔야 연딩 촌이 소승문에 따투바이나 아니 샘단 예우차야지 가부용야지 아도 디 견치고 좀 되대바이나 연대 여바이나야 딜 삼로마단 견치고 삼대바이나 아니 마가블로 예치 타르 무차야지 뭐 딘디 용거레스
But also when we see the way that the mind is affected by those attitudes, and we entertain that notion, that thought, how would it be like for us to not consider others as enemies? If your mind doesn't think of another person as this is my enemy, your mind will still be able to stay in a happy or a calm frame of mind. Whereas when you label someone in your mind as your enemy, this is my enemy, whenever you see that person or hear them, there is that unhappiness or discomfort that creeps into your mind. So we can see how first off the mind is affected by the notion of enemy, and is not affected by that if you do not conceive of or perceive someone as being your enemy. So as people, for example, we all have a combination of positive qualities and faults. If we acquaint the mind with looking at the faults of another person, that's that sense of uneasiness, becoming a bit detached or removed from that person will arise in our mind. Whereas if we think of the good qualities in our mind, we'll start to feel more close to them. There is a sense of closeness that will develop between ourselves and them, at least in our mind, where we tend to think of the good qualities. We develop a sense of affection to them. So then when we look at how it affects our immediate relations, if you're in the school system, then you have your classmates, you have your teachers, you have your principals. And of course, as human beings, we have faults and we have good qualities. If you only think of the faults of your classmates, your teachers, and so forth, you will dislike them. You'll see them in some sense as enemies of yours. In your heart, you will draw further and further away from them.
데레 베나 아주 미치기 바이나야 미디냠드 니 초보 인삼니 미디냠드 데바이나 기부여라스더라 박페부 이치나 레바 미딩가 마가스지 미딩이 자인삼 데바이나 아니 이제 메바 기부 메바 딘리 용거라 디 야시자다 용거라스 비기 미치기 바이나야 미디냠드 데온디 아니 삼루ခေ당게 차니 소소레야 아니 대둑 째기도 왔어라. 딘자다 연댕이 촌도 따스야디 아니 겐센침보 얌침보로 딘지기 랍제트는 도와서라.
So when we look at, for example, the way that we react to a friend, to a certain person. So when we meet another person and we think of that person as being my friend, if our mind thinks that this is my friend, we trust that person, and also we feel at ease in the company of that person. Whereas if we encounter someone and our mind reacts with disliking that person, when we're in the company of that person, we'll have a sense of distrust, and also our mind will be made unhappy. So we have the tendency to think that our happiness or unhappiness is over there in the person, but actually it's in the way that we react to that person. And therefore, when you think of such instructions, the ones that we've been covering here, that says that we should find the good qualities of others so that our mind would be made happy in the presence, that would have a sense of ease, a sense of trust in others when we're in the company, you can appreciate the potency of such advice.
대단히 맞지 로사기스라
Mm,
연된 조바양 티랑인데
mm,
연된 조바양 냠바부 갑라 파브나 인지 쇼실 손네 마저나 니반기와 메노 데네 나르슈스미 님보 가치 시비 연네 랑기 멤버 집이 승제노 텔라 차반 인시비 태바 면데바 조비 찬주 진두주고 대한 랑은 도자텔라 자바 구이 도자텔라 삼바디 마케는 니반로 마인데 드버미니 비체로스.
So in the previous week, we read through a section that explains the practices that we need to take up in order to make sure that we are not separated from bodhicitta in our future lives. So we read through what kind of negative practices cause the separation from bodhicitta in future lives, and which practices are supportive of bodhicitta in future lives. So we read through the third positive thing that we need to do in order to not be separated from bodhicitta in future life, and that was referring to becoming happy with the praise of others, or thinking of the good qualities of others. So it says that, for example, the object of the third virtuous practice is all bodhisattvas. The action is to generate the perception of them as resembling the Buddha, the teacher, and to proclaim truthful praise about them in the four directions. Then it says, if there is, at the end of this passage, it says, if there is an audience and there's an opportunity to express their excellent qualities, do so. However, if you do not go to all four directions and proclaim their qualities, this is not a fault. This virtuous practice is the antidote to the third non-virtuous practice. Now let's look at the fourth virtuous practice. The object of the fourth virtuous practice are the sentient beings who are ripened by you. The action is to cause them to hold to complete enlightenment without wishing for a temporary vehicle.
너는 나중에 입어 본데 신 대화 탐지기 탈투발라 인타바니 정도여나 신라 이 메디빈 겨바 잠시 기비체도 이 메디와 기비 저체도 메디비체라스.
And it continues in saying, moreover, while from your side, you should cause your disciple to make a connection with it. If that thought does not arise in the disciple, it does not become a fault because you were not unable to accomplish it. By means of this virtuous practice, you abandon the second non-virtuous practice. For if you wish from the depth of your heart to establish others in the ultimate of all types of happiness, you would not do something to cause them to give rise to the mental unhappiness, so they give rise to regret that is itself mental unhappiness.
이러다 배는 안주 강라야 아니지 세워요사 가사델이야 독자 체고 삼비기 상바디 뒤남이 끼기 말았어 뭐가 사질이야 아니 독자 체야기 상로디 콜고라 인자 제비 로세디 딘디기 가서다 케네진치 차고르다 디아 아니 직수수기 문이 베길이야 배준치니 드마르지레마도 아니 세워기 뭐사기 로 장받기 뭐사기 아니 소차 수치 요말 쓴 거다 수치 요말에서 가서는 피기야 소소 나신기 피기야 대원 되고요리 동안 되고 매와디 소소도 찍어지기 인자 디 대원도 되는 치마로 냠바디 디 동안도 되는 치마로 냠비 로디 끼어바지 좋았어.
After all, when we think of those stuff we like, those stuff we love, if there's someone that we like, there's someone that we love, there's no thought of doing something bad to that person. There's no thought that arises in our mind to harm them if we like them. So the cultivation of love and a sense of care for others is crucial here in relation to this section. And we make effort in order to develop love and compassion for others. And it could be the case that in some cases we are successful in our endeavor, in other cases we are not that successful in trying to work for their sake. And nonetheless, there is no one that is excluded from our cultivation of love and care, because we recognize that they're just like me. They're just like me in seeking happiness and well-being, and they're just like me in wanting to be free from suffering and pain. And since all of us are the same in seeking happiness and wanting to abstain, to refrain from suffering, it is suitable, it is worthwhile to extend that sense of love and care to everyone.
그래서 맨날 셴라야 마릅 진도그 상로치 레기여바이나 디기 가르된 거라서디 수수기 남주근 당금해봤다 수수기 잠재근 당금해봐 간지 수수 유연된 게 당금해봐지 유근이 무유 내수찬이 더 뒷된 거여레스 그러 다치 수수 남주당 잠재다 유연된 게 아니 당인 지인바는 수직이야 아니 내버게 말이스 수직이야 내버게 말이스
So then when we look at the way that we behave, and we find that in some situations we treat others badly, it is an indication to us that we haven't approached that practice in a smart way, that a sense of care and love for others are still insufficient. So it's not the fault of others, it is our fault in not acquainting our mind with looking at the qualities, the good qualities of others. If we treat others with love, with a sense of care, if there's no one that we treat badly, it means that we have taken the practice of love and concern for others to the right measure, and also the knowledge or the qualities that we have developed are sufficient for maintaining that sense of care for others.
들다 만다나 가르치고 세디여라다 만다나 장고 그래서 아주 로종기 만다나 익세 트레말다 익세 트레야 당인 시바 로종 치고 난신기 아니 잠질에 자연도 왔어 시럽생 자연도 연댕이 차 가리인 바야냐 장이 깨고야지 장이 콤벌들 로고야지 이마자다 넘버 산지비기 쇼나네 다수 개천부 쇼진 띵사부 쇼진 로 스부 쇼진다 아니 송샤스라.
So then when we look at how we behave, if we find that we haven't developed the sense of love and care for others to an adequate level, and we wonder, what do I need to do about it? Well, the answer for that is simple. We need to continue to train. We need to continue to study. Just like you could say that when you sit for an exam at school or a certain institute for education, you need to study for the exam. You need to make effort in generating the knowledge. So the generation, the build-up of knowledge from Buddhist perspective is regarded as very important. So there's a vast tradition of developing knowledge, profound knowledge, and very clear knowledge.
There is single shibali gangs, Kiwa Kondu Chanju Sem, Malam Naya, Semden, Tormin Gurna, Manyalsi, Muchi, Sarwa Kangin Gurus.
And so there is a quotation in the text that is taken from the Questions of a Line Sutra, which says, by what means is bodhisattva, bodhicitta? Yeah, by what means is bodhicitta not given up in all one's lives, not even in one's dreams, much less while one is not asleep.
다들 나는 요를 사실이 먼저 깨워 건두세 깨워는 깨워 준세 들라온디 다지 깨워하시디 자르고 다디 아니 먼저 민망부 쇼질이야 아니 로라야다 마테바도 마숑바도 딘망미 용거라서
Now, one complicated point in this section begins with the question, by what means is bodhicitta not given up in all one's lives? Which means that how can we make sure that from life after life after life, in all of our lives, we will not give up on bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment? It's a complicated question because it supposes that we accept the existence of past and future lives, which is something that quite a few people find difficult to accept.
그래다 네 카야마 당한주 통구요 말았어. 깨와 치마세야디 만통디 켈레 마투고 소리지. 까ಕೊಳ್ಳ이야. 양 까ಕೊಳ್ಳ이야 만통나야 아니 켈렌도 로데야디. 안슬린 간다 디어라서 페나 당에 빼자야 찌려야 산이게 내술티 대링 아주 아니 통구월했으나 통구요 말았어. 통구요 말대야나 산이 종규 산이기 체도 대릴레가 가르치고 줬나야 제투구요라더디 아니 산이 여버디 만통나야 샘나를 숑구요라더 로제막 아니 단단 통구요 말대 로제미 체도 단단 내가 제투구요래 샘나 숑구어디 이나 만통나야 샘나 숑야지 다 깨워치마스 라온디게 샘나 큐니 숑고 말 가서는 만통이 균세레 말도 셴바 칸요 말았어 딩 간도 로제레도 왔어.
So we might find this topic that propounds the existence of past and future lifetimes to be difficult. We can't really get a head around it. But it's actually quite interesting because there's the basic assumption is that since we cannot see future lives, we can't really see it directly. It's difficult to accept that they exist. But then when we look at the sets of beliefs that we have, well, sometimes we trust that things exist despite not being able to see them. And in other cases, we do not trust that they exist because we cannot see them. Just to illustrate that quite simply, for example, we don't see tomorrow. We believe that tomorrow will come, but this is not something that we see now. We don't see it now, but still, today we try to act, to behave, to do a particular thing, to work, in order to make sure that tomorrow will work well. And the same thing happens with next year, for example. We cannot see next year now. We cannot see it, but still we trust that it will come, and we work now. We put sometimes a lot of effort into what we do now in order to make sure that next year will go well for us. So there are some things that cannot be seen, but we still trust that they exist. Whereas other things, they cannot be seen just as well, but we find it really difficult to get a head around their existence.
들다 일단 딜로 인사를 개체슈디 아니 삼담에 둥이 소리지. 그런 아주 미게 로단로지. 개체슈들이야 삼로시라 땅 두고 매봐. 개체중 질이야 슈지 베게 매준치 되어 소리지. 들이 차고도 하더라. 다 깨워치마지. 킬렘바 있나? 펜토 카리오르세지. 그러. 깨워치마 여담에게 깨져 마셔야지. 깨워치마 킬렘바 있나? 펜토 카리오르세지. 그래서 산이 니즈 킬랭거리 로지메 니즈 킬랭거리 다 디기 체도 다 산이 종규 산이 킬랭온디 산이 체도 대리 내가 제고다 산이 체도 대리 내가 제디 아직 아니 로종 제 연구를라 소 디지 아니 벤저 소야도지 그러 캄바 소야도지 칼라 대디 체로 딘디우다 다 디기 쇼쇼지 지단한 간절로 쇼 고거되네 디기 lab chimbu shu dindi gi chago mares ba da kewa chima khelen ba na kewa chima lai pembi gi chawa chi tanga derin go zom go goras kewa chima lai pembi gi chawa di ani khala da penjor da khambala sobe gi kewa chima lai pen di drivya da peshi da delaya rigba yo mares da gyunze yo mares pembi gyunze zawni ni yo mares da penya nyakchi yo ba di shen lai 직삼바 남다기 펜섬 지야티 자와 마롱와 마치야티 다 깨워 치말이야 펜바치 디차고 디치디 깨워 치마 킬렘바이나 미드 탐부제다 뎀바제다 체험위람라에 끼어투야 깨워 치마 케 마나바이나 데리 카르라바디 캡산란 찌바이나 아니 마럽지야다 촉좀 지야다 간지 두수 용대야로 딘지 닐루지 야시야다 위어레스 티바르들라
So then we work out some reasons that support the existence of future lives, but setting that aside for the time being, one thing that we can think of would be what would be the benefit in accepting that future lifetimes exist? How is it helpful? Well, if we believe that tomorrow exists, if we accept that next year will come, we do certain things now in order to secure a better future. So when we think of, for example, tomorrow, next month, next year, and so forth, we take care of our business in this life, in that, we might study, we can leave that aside as study, but we make sure that we have enough money to sustain ourselves, that we have a place to live, that we have a house, that we have food, and so forth. Of course, we need all of them. But if you have a lot of those things, at the end of the day, it doesn't kind of make a huge difference. So then when we think of how we accept that tomorrow will come, that next year will come, and that we work and make effort in order to secure a better future, well, what would happen, for example, if we were to accept the existence of future life? If we start today to think of future lifetimes exist, well, the things that we place our priority on in relation to this life, securing house and food and money and so forth, and whether we'll be able to go with us to future lifetimes, well, there's no reason or logic in thinking that whatever good circumstance we have in this life or today in terms of food and housing and money and so forth, that it will be helpful in future lifetimes. So if you think that they will be very helpful, so if I have a lot of money in this life, a house and so forth, it would be really helpful for me in future lifetime. There's no reason, there's no logic that supports that. But what will be beneficial in terms of future lifetimes is for me to develop an altruistic intention, to abstain from behaving inappropriately, to become an honest person, a truthful person, to abstain from harming others, to develop a non-violent approach. That would be beneficial in terms of future lives.
간도 내비 연남수 장줄남의 양단수 대나 샘들 민교로 세소 현양 알게단 타도단 세나방바단 현진조와 통나 이가와 시단 대나 물론부터 잠부지 신고벌에 송바다 그질레 졸음 탐지도 장주기 샘 장바다 개워지지 영원도 장주기 샘 동화체나 개워신도야 rumbu체다 민대바니 쳇다쳇다 마음도 메다나 시소기 사월 송소스.
And so when we continue the reading of these sections, first of all, a question was raised by what means is bodhicitta not given up in all one's life, not even in one's dreams, much less while one is not asleep. He spoke, in cities or in villages in the countries where you live, guide others correctly to enlightenment. Through that, bodhicitta will not be abandoned. Furthermore, array of qualities in Manjushi's Buddha field teaches that The aspiration is not abandoned if one possessed four qualities: having abandoned pride, having abandoned jealousy, having abandoned miserliness, and being mentally joyful when seeing others' wealth. The Cloud of Jewels Sutra clearly teaches that if you train in bodhicitta in all behaviors and generate bodhicitta before starting any virtuous activity, you will not be separated from this precious mind in other lives either. As it is said, if a person investigates time and time again.
That's
all. 제자들이 건설라티와 연합이나
쟤네들 얘기만 다 대신
Shall
우주 제소를 쳐.
no,
우주 제소를 쳐서
that's all. Shall we leave it here for today? Cool. Thank you. So we'll finish up with the final Lamrim dedication, which is found here. For my two collections, vast space the mass from working with effort, it is practiced for a great length of time. May I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eyes blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I've discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wishfully be radiant be granted bounteous peace. May the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this great path of enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of the lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may ocean of prosperity spread everywhere.